Hi, everyone. Welcome. And I'm so glad you're joining Operation Parent and Laura Stack here today for our webinar. We've got an action-packed afternoon planned for you, and we can't wait to get started. So you're going to receive a recording of the webinar and a certificate within 5 hours of our program here. You're also going to receive immediately following the program a link to the survey. Our audience has been so generous in giving us continued feedback, and you're definitely being a part of watching and helping this webinar program grow and getting the word out to parents and caregivers about the need for getting ahead of today's substances. So we appreciate all of your feedback and input in that survey. So continue giving it to us, and I promise you we will use every word. Our mission here at Operation Parent is to support parents by providing real-world information, connection, and most importantly, hope. Today, Laura is going to take us through unpacking the risk of modern marijuana, and we could not be more ready for that. We invite you to do this quick registration for our next two webinars. Launch, Don't Crash. So this is for those that have high schoolers and can help your high schooler take charge of their health. And then we're also going to be helping you unpack steps and ways to help your teens prevent addiction. So that could be anywhere from substance use to pornography to technology. So that's going to be another great webinar in May. So we've got quick registration available for those two webinars as well. We've got important key takeaways today here with Laura. We're discovering how Laura Stack turned the tragic loss of her son, Johnny, into a movement. She's dedicated to education about the dangers of high-THC marijuana. She's going to help us learn about the different high-potency marijuana products, and there are a lot of them that are used by today's youth. She's going to help us better understand how adolescent marijuana use can lead to mental illness, severe psychosis, and suicide. Laura founded Johnny Ambassadors, her nonprofit, and she's on a mission to educate parents, teens, and communities about the dangers of high THC and marijuana. She is powerfully spreading this mission of Johnny Ambassadors and honoring her son's legacy every day. She's returning as for another webinar with us, and we cannot be more grateful for that. I am so impressed by the way she is bluntly showing the impact of marijuana on today's youth with evidence-based research backing up everything that she does. She's urging parents and caregivers like us to stay ahead of this risky substance. She brings prevention education to conferences, communities, and most importantly, right in the front line to schools. She's calling for youth marijuana use to stop. She's also has an amazing book, which I've had the honor of reading, The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana, Johnny Stack's Life and Death Story. And her presentations are exceptional. If you have the ability to get her to your community, I would urge you to do so. And Laura, thank you so much for joining us again today.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. And I'm so grateful for the chance to be here again, and am duly impressed by the work you're doing through Operation Parents. So I'm blessed to have this opportunity to talk with parents. I understand there's some schools here, some communities about the work that we're doing and how they can prevent youth THC use. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Laura, we are so thrilled that you could come back and join us again, and we can't wait for everything that we're going to learn from you this afternoon.
You are so kind. Okay, well, let me share my slides, and we shall get started here. All right. Well, for those of you whom I've never had the chance to meet, hello, this is my son. This is Johnny, and where it all started. I always take the chance to kind of show you a little bit about my son's personality before we get started, just to give you some some context. He was warm and loving and smiling, as you can tell from all of these photos. He was very engaged in school. He loved school. He was an athlete. He ran cross country. He ran track. He was musical. He played the piano. He played the guitar. We're a Christian family. He was very involved in our church. I have an older daughter named Megan and a younger son named James. And the five of us taught Sunday school for 4-year-olds for many years. He led a lot of service projects. I mean, all of the protective factors that you hear about. Johnny was a wonderful person. I wish you could have met him. He was wicked smart. He hated it when I bragged about him, but he got a perfect SAT score in math, 800 out of 800. He was brilliant. He wanted to be a computer engineer. He had a scholarship to Colorado State University, and he lost that scholarship. And then he got a scholarship to the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, and he lost that scholarship too. Johnny never got B's in school until the second semester of his senior year in high school, and he got 4 D's. Sadly, on November 21st, 2019, it's been over 5 years now, just a few hours after he died, the woman in black came to our home and told us the word no parent ever wants to hear. Mr. and Mrs. Stack, I'm with the coroner's office, and I'm so sorry to tell you your son is deceased. That obviously was the worst day of my life, and it was the last thing that we expected to hear. And my husband, John, and I are stronger than ever, and we are still here, and we are still standing to share with everybody about what happened so that they can keep this from happening to their children as well. And the bottom line, and I'll start there, Johnny started using marijuana when he was 14 years old. This is what he looked like. You see, we are from Colorado, the first state out of all 50 states to legalize recreational marijuana. Johnny was born right into this. Lucky me. He was born in 2000. Marijuana was legalized in Colorado in 2012 when he was 12 years old. It came out into the dispensaries in 2014, and now he is in 9th grade in high school. And he goes to his first high school party where there is marijuana at the party. How do I know this? He told me. We were very close. I was his person. He came home from the party and he said, Mom and Dad, I just want you to know there was marijuana at the party today. So-and-so's brother, who will be nameless, brought it. And all the boys wanted to try to get high. And they handed it to me and said, here, hit this. And he's like, no, I'm good. And they said, are you chicken? Come on, Johnny, everybody's doing it. And he said, Mom, I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know what to say. And I just want you to know that I did. And I'm sorry. And I am stunned by this because had you known Johnny, he was a real rule follower up to this point. So I said to him, honey, thank you for being honest. And I just have to say that I'm really surprised by your decision, son, because that's not like you. You know the rules of our family. Now, you can recite it. No drinking, no smoking, no drugs, no marijuana. And I have to tell you, son, don't ever do that again, I said to him, because that genius mind of yours will be destroyed. And we dropped it. We thought maybe this will just be a one-time thing and he'll never do it again. Unfortunately, that was the start of an obsession by Johnny. Treatments, doctors, programs, 3 mental hospital stays. I'll go through all of that. Insurance wouldn't help us. Doctors wouldn't believe us. $200,000 out of our pockets spent trying everything that we could think of in a state that nobody thought marijuana was addictive. But before I tell you that, because we have a lot of parents on, I want to share with you what I did not say to Johnny, because it's what I said to myself in my head as his mom. The very first thing I said when he told me he used marijuana at the party was, what's the big deal? It's just weed. Like, I used it when I was a kid. It didn't hurt me. And I was so very wrong. And I was so ignorant. And I was incredibly uneducated. You see, when I was 17, and I, am very straightforward, I used marijuana. My buddy, Jim, was growing weed illegally in his basement. This was literally Jim's basement weed. And there were 8 of us on our squad. We would go over to Jim's house. I remember him rolling the joints, and we would share one with 8 of us. And I remember kind of giggling a little bit. And I remember going to Denny's. I don't know why I remember that. Not that you used it, but that was like a thing we ate. But I just remember not liking it very much. I just didn't like it. So I never used it again when Jim and I and all our buddies went on after high school. And so when Johnny told me he was using at the party, I thought he was talking about the same stuff that I used when I was a teen, if that makes sense. I had no concept about any of this. I mean, we didn't have vapes and gummies and, dabs. In fact, when I first heard of dabbing, I thought it was that dance move that Cam Newton used to do. I mean, I was so embarrassed. So I had to learn a lot. It was thrown into the throes of this with our son. And so I had to learn a lot of terminology. And so that's the first thing I want to kind of talk about, because there's a lot of confusion when I talk with parents, like, you hear cannabis and marijuana and THC and CBD and Delta 8 and Delta 9 and like all these words. Okay, so let's go over terms. So cannabis, the umbrella term, is a genus in the plant kingdom. It's a genus of flowering plant. In the plant kingdom, a genus has species that come underneath it. Cannabis is no different. There are hundreds of different species, varieties, strains of cannabis. But there's 2 categories broadly: drugs and not drugs. All right? Drug varieties are all species of plant that contain, and this is the definition of marijuana, and that is the botanical term. Okay, that is science. For all plants that contain greater than 0.3% THC. If it contains greater than 0.3% THC, and marijuana is delta triangle 9. So that means we better define THC, which is the chemical. It's an abbreviation, delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Tetrahydrocannabinol. Nobody says tetrahydrocannabinol. Everybody just says THC, which is the ingredient or the chemical, because it's of the cannabis genus, what's called a cannabinoid, that gives users the high feeling when you ingest it. So whether you smoke it or eat it or vape it or dab it or whatever, however THC gets into your body, that is what gives you the high feeling. So it is psychoactive, right? That's all marijuana, delta 9 THC, greater than 0.3% THC, drug species. Now, there's another entire category of cannabis. All of it is called hemp. Hemp is also cannabis, but it is not considered a drug variety because it has less than 0.3% THC, if any at all, naturally. Hemp, you see, is more of an industrial plant. It's tall, it's fibrous. It's usually used for things like paint and paper and insulation. It doesn't contain hardly any THC. You could literally smoke hemp all day long and it would not make you high. It would burn your lungs and burn your throat, but it wouldn't make you high because it contains a higher amount of the second most common cannabinoid chemical in the plant called CBD, cannabidiol, on its own in hemp does not make you feel high. But there's a little catch. You see, there's this little loophole in the Farm Act of 2018 that legalized hemp. They sort of forgot to say you can't make derivative products from hemp that are psychoactive. And yeah, there's some legislation trying to close that loophole right now. But some really smart chemists figured, hey, hemp is legal in all 50 states. Marijuana is only legal in 26 states. Hemp is legal in all 50 states. So what if we take the CBD from hemp and we pull it into the lab and we run a chemical process on it called isomerization? What if we just turn the CBD into an isomer called delta 8? And you can see the chemical structures here. Delta 8 has a separate double bind. On delta 9, the double bind is on the right. On delta 8, the double bind is on the left. So if you take CBD and you close this carbon molecule and you scooch this double bind, presto, you now have delta 8 THC. Remember, delta 9 THC is from marijuana. Delta 8 THC is CBD and hemp. And now it is psychoactive, where before it wasn't. 100% chemically made, all made in the lab with a bunch of toxic chemical byproducts. But now, when I speak in schools in states where marijuana is not legal, I just spoke at a whole bunch of schools in Tennessee. Delta 8 is everywhere. And they really don't monitor purchases because it's legal. Like, there's no age restriction. Yeah, they're supposed to be 21, 18, whatever. But the kids all tell me they can buy it anywhere. General store, smoke shop, CBD shops, vape stores, they're selling Delta 8 in Texas and Florida. So the point is, it doesn't matter whether it's legal or not legal where you live. Now, when I was growing up and using marijuana, and I'm going to put a picture of actual marijuana up. So this is marijuana. If you magnify the bud, all right, female pollinated, now we're talking delta 9 THC, you start to see these sticky looking little glands. These are called trichomes. And if you magnify one of them thousands of times, you get what looks like a golf ball and a golf tee. So when I was smoking marijuana back in the 80s, the strength, the potency of the THC in the marijuana plant was about 2% THC in a gram of dried flower. In the 60s, it was 1%. When I was using it, it was 80%. And people who were smoking marijuana wanted it to be stronger. They wanted a higher THC content because that means that you can buy less, get high faster. Ooh, capitalists started seeing dollar signs and they started breeding the various species of marijuana that contained higher and higher and higher levels of THC. So here in this golf ball, right here is the THC. So here's a chart from a colleague of mine from the DEA. We just exhibited together at CADCA, Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. The DEA was right next to us. We have had wonderful conversations. These are seized samples of marijuana starting in 1995 when my daughter was born and had reached 4%. So now this is not, the ditchweed that grew in the ground that you could pick, that's been around for hundreds of years. This is now a GMO, a genetically modified organism. This is not natural marijuana in that sense. By the time Johnny was born, it was about 5%. In 2010, it finally reached 10%. And what the medical profession kind of considered high potency, it wasn't even considered addictive until 2013. It was entered into the DSM-5, Diagnostics and Statistical Manual, 5th edition, as cannabis use disorder. It didn't even happen until it hit 10%. In other words, weed today is considered high potency. You can't buy Jim's basement weed. Jim's basement weed has been bred out of existence. Today, here's 2021, it was 15%. 2025, You can walk into any dispensary when you're 21 years old in Colorado, in any dispensary nationwide, and buy, on average, 20% THC in a gram of flower. But there exist strains that are 25, 30, 35, and 40%. John and I saw, my husband, a 42% strain of cannabis flower in a California dispensary. But then a funny thing happened. The plant stopped being able to hold more than about 40% THC. They still don't really know why. They're trying to kind of genetically cross some plants, but some really smart people in Colorado thought to themselves, what if we could just suck out that THC out of that trichome? What if we could figure out a way to just extract the part of the plant that makes you high and make a whole bunch of super new potent products out of that in a lab? And that is what they did. So this machine is called an extractor, and it was invented. There are hundreds of devices like this now for the commercial manufacture of extracted THC products. These are all as a category called dabs, which refer to the serving size. A little bitty bit. It's concentrated. All right, so what do? Well, basically, you load the marijuana up into the chambers there, and then a solvent is poured through it. Those black seals have a solvent. It's can be any number of things, but it could be ethanol, propane, butane. There's lots of different extraction methods, but when that runs through the plant, it causes those trichomes to break off. That THC leaves the plant. They toss the plant, okay? So none of these products have any organic matter. They filter that solution to try to get the solvent back out. They can't get it all out, which means that some of it's going into your brain. They try to get most of it out. And then they distill it, right? Just like vodka 5 times distilled, right? You make it into a distillate. Basically, it's dried, it's heated, kind of spun. Out of the machine come products now. Average dispensary, 60% THC in a concentrate. But there exist products that are 70, 80, 90, nearly 100% pure. And I'm going to show you some of these pictures, but I want to be really clear. This presentation I'm doing for Operation Parent is 100% not the presentation I give to teens. They have different slides, different content, different everything, because I don't show teens drug photos. I don't believe in doing that. I think it incites curiosity. I don't want to accidentally give anybody a lesson in using these things, and it is not necessary in the context of a school assembly. So just don't want anybody emailing me going, why are you? I don't show drug photos to teens. Okay, just make sure everybody knows that. So now these are no longer plants, these are chemicals. And dabs, these dabs, meaning a teeny tiny bit, I'm just going to show you some pictures of them. They tend to name them by what they look like. So this is called crystal. So this particular product, this concentrate, is like 99% pure THC. And, you know, that looks like kind of like meth. I mean, kind of like crack. So literally in the same way, you can take cocaine and turn it into crack, right? Different drug, concentrated. You can take the THC and you can turn it into concentrate, into, in this case, it's a crystal. This is a butane hash oil. This is shatter, named again by their consistencies, how they look. That one's about 90% THC. This is a sugar and ambrosia. This is resin. This is batter, B-A-D-D-E-R, and diesel wax. So as you can see, these are no longer plants. And the teens are funny. They come up to me and they're like, oh, Mrs. Stack, you know, I don't use that dab stuff. I'm just smoking the weed. And I'm like, dude, none of this stuff is Jim's basement weed anymore. it's all high potency. They go, oh, it's natural. God made it. It comes from the ground. I'm like, none of these things grow in the ground. These are all chemicals. So there's so much misinformation out there and so much misunderstanding that the teens and their parents, because they're like me going, what? It's just weed, right? So this is the bottom of an 8.5 by 11 flyer, Colorado, that if you purchase a concentrate, they are required to put into your bag. It's Times New Roman 20 point a period, so that people are aware of how strong these are. And this is a billboard that our nonprofit Johnny's Ambassadors put up in Denver by our dispensaries to warn people, if you take a dab, which is heated and inhaled, it's smoked, but it goes into your lungs, into your blood, into your brain, bam, you're high like that. I mean, it's like smoking 50 joints from when I was a kid. That's how strong it is. And this is what people don't understand, that these concentrates are a completely different product from anything that we've had before. Now, that's just the solid concentrates. You can also have in the distillates that are liquid. I mean, this was revolutionary in the marijuana industry when they could simply add, vitamin E acetate, some materials to make it viscous. Once you had an oil, you can put oil into anything. You can put them into cartridges, which are vapes, which are aerosols. They're not really vapes. It's not vapor. It's aerosol, burns your lungs. But the kids are funny. They're like, oh, I'm just vaping. And it's like, okay, are you vaping Juul, as in e-cigarettes, as in nicotine? That's a vape. Or are you vaping high THC oils? 80%, pretty typical. Most of the schools who invite me to speak, many of them are seeing a rise in vaping. That is like the most common thing, because the teens are not dumb enough to buy the flavored ones, right? They buy just the regular ones for the most part. And they're very hard to catch because many of them have no smell, and they're easy to disguise. Sometimes there's even clothing lines now where they can blow the vape into a sleeve called a sploof. And I mean, it's incredible. There's whole industries around this to keep them from getting caught using it. But 19 out of 20 times when I talk to the counselors or the principals, it's THC vape versus nicotine vape, which years ago they were nicotine vape, but now it's more THC vape. And the same thing, again, it doesn't matter if it's not legal in your state, because I mean, you can walk into the store. So I get pictures from parents all the time. This is one, I think it's Virginia, where here in the dollar store, you can buy these vapes. Now, these are not Delta 9, these are Delta 8. And many states have banned Delta 8 products, but a lot of states have not. Texas, marijuana is not legal, but Delta 8 is everywhere. And having a huge problem with this. In Colorado, they banned Delta 8 because it was competing with the marijuana industry. I mean, come on. All of it is toxic. Now, the difference, of course, is some of it is stronger than others, like these maybe are not as strong as the Delta 9 vape. They just use twice as much, right? 3 times as much. So it just doesn't matter. It's all THC. THC is THC. It doesn't matter if it's recreational, it's medical, it's all the same product. This was in a gas station. So think about a child, 6 years old, maybe they're not really a good reader. I mean, look at the Doritos bag. I'm sorry, that kind of looks like Doritos to me. But if you look real carefully, you can't see it in this picture, the little square there says 600 milligrams Delta 8 THC. That is an emergency room visit right there. In Colorado, we have had a 600% increase in poisonings and calls from the Rocky Mountain Poison Control Center since legalization. Check this one out. This is Rob Hots. This is in Colorado. My husband John found this in our yard where little first and second graders were walking. This box of edibles gummies has 1,000 milligrams of THC in it. Now, a serving in Colorado is 10 milligrams. One serving is 10 milligrams. That is enough to put you on your butt. 10 milligrams of THC is like smoking 2 joints by myself when I was a kid. Like, it's so strong. But 10 milligrams is not one gummy. Look at this. It says there are 20 gummies in this box, 50 milligrams each. They actually think that you're going to read the package and just eat an ear off the gum. Do you think the kids are like looking at the package? Oh, I should just eat it. They just put the whole thing in their mouth. Bam, you just had 5 servings of THC. And then what happens when you eat it? Nothing, because you ate it. So now it's going to take 30 to 60 minutes before you feel anything. And then meanwhile, the teen's like, nothing happened. So they eat more and they eat more. I guess I should have another one. And now you have an overdose. And this is what a lot of people also don't understand. They're like, oh, you can't overdose on THC. What? Have you ever seen a THC overdose? I have. So have every counselor I've ever talked to at any school who has had to call 911 to get an ambulance for a teen who has eaten 5 or 10 of these and now is acutely vomiting, passing out, convulsing, not able to breathe, psychotic episodes, hallucinating. If you have not seen an overdose, you would believe it if you saw it. And that's the problem, is a lot of people go, oh, well, it's not going to make you stop breathing. Well, just because we don't have a receptor for cannabinoids in our brainstem, I'm going to talk about that. It's not going to make you like die like an opioid or a fentanyl, but you can absolutely overdose on it like they do. And oh, by the way, look at the ingredients here. Butane and ethanol used in extraction. It's still in the product. They can't get it all out. But those are toxic, which means that poison is getting into your lungs, blood, brain, also causing huge harm. Now, this is all dose dependent. Again, marijuana wasn't considered addictive until 2013. We are seeing much higher levels of addiction that comes along with legalization, increased use, increased addiction. This is the latest from SAMHSA, the 2022, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, that's done every 2 years. This one shows us that nearly half, 45% of teens ages 12 to 17 who use, so in the past year, nearly 3 million this year, teens ages 12 to 17 use. And of those, almost 45% had cannabis use disorder, addiction, problematic use. The brain is not equipped to handle, bam, all of this THC. And that is what I focus on mostly when I go to schools. The schools, I mean, we know as parents, don't do drugs, drugs are bad, like a really, preachy, judgmental lecture, that doesn't work. But if you talk about science, the brain, data, MRIs, you show them the research, they are fascinated. And principals tell me all the time, oh, our kids are so squirrely. They're going to be in the gym and it's going to be really hard to hear. And I'm like, no, they will be totally focused on me for an hour and you will be able to hear a pin drop. because they are so fascinated by this. So I have come to believe that, I mean, I don't even really just say, you know, don't use it. I say, here's the evidence and why this is a bad idea for you at your age. It's your choice. You know, I'm leaving. I'm getting on a plane after this. So it's ultimately your decision. But I want to show you why I would encourage you to not use it. And here's why. And that seems to go real well. You know, you probably already know a lot about the brain formation. Just as a reminder, in case you don't, that our brains as humans have to continue to grow. The brains grow from the back of the skull forward, bottom of the head up, and it wraps around in the last place to form right in front, the prefrontal cortex, the adult brain. The teen brain has stopped right at about the amygdala. They're still developing those executive functions of decision-making, problem-solving, empathy, all of those things, lack of judgment, right? They're still forming all of that. This chart shows till the age of 20, but actually we know that young women's brains continue to form until about the age of 25. We know young men's brains, 2019 research out of the UK, continue to form until the age of 28 to 30. No surprise there, right? We probably don't need a lot of commentary on that. But as the brain is forming, what we've learned through research in the last few years, I'm not talking about the old Jim's basement weed now, I'm talking about these very high potency products. In fact, the mechanism of how THC makes you high wasn't even discovered until 1992. Turns out there's receptors in the brain, and these were named CB1 and CB2. Cannabinoid 1 regulates the nervous system, and look at the big cluster of receptors in the brain, right? We're going to come back to that for youth, but it exists in a lot of different organs as well. CB2, cannabinoid 2 receptors control the immune system. They exist in your digestion, there's receptors in the reproductive organs. That's why THC can have such a dramatic impact on a lot of different areas and functions in your body. Collectively, this is known as the ECS, the endocannabinoid system. And what we know is that these receptors and its natural chemical, which is called anandamide, and everybody's heard of serotonin and dopamine, but very few people have heard of our natural neurotransmitter, our natural high, so to speak, called anandamide, that controls your moods, your emotions, your energy. It is the body's bliss molecule. But here's the problem. Anandamide, the body's natural chemical that binds into that CB1 receptor, and THC, the external cannabinoid, those molecules are identical on the bottom of the molecule. This is what's called a partial agonist because the top is different. So when THC enters the body, right, whether the kid smokes it or vapes it or eats it or whatever, into the lungs, into the blood, into the brain thinks THC is the real thing. THC is an imposter molecule. In other words, we didn't just have this random receptor in our brain because some plant out there existed. We have for thousands of years had this receptor for anandamide, but because this plant, and that's really, they don't know why, has a identical molecular structure, it allows it to bind in that brain, and it changes that development that the brain is going through. I'm not going to go through all of the process, adaptogenesis, apoptosis, myelination, there's all that, but suffice it to say that when THC gets into the teen brain, there is still development going on in all of these brain parts. My brain is formed. Your brain is formed, right? Not that, THC is guaranteed to be harmless for any adult, but it is much more dangerous in the forming teen brain because of how it changes the growth. Now, I showed the teens lots of different science. I'm going to show you a few studies. For example, here is an MRI study. This took 799 14-year-olds, and they did MRI scans on their brain. This is only a few years old, okay? This is new research. Don't look at the old stuff. Then they took those teens 5 years later when they were 19 years old, and they did MRI scans on their brains. And depending upon how many times that teen had used THC in that 5-year period, with 0 being the baseline, they showed a thinning in the prefrontal cortex. What does that mean, a thinning in the prefrontal cortex? Literally, these ones over here who used the most, and it had a lot to do with age of onset, frequency of use, potency of use, had brains that weighed 30% less. Why? Oh, it turns out there's this little process in the brain called apoptosis, which is the controlled pruning or thinning out of the synapses, the pathways that you don't use. This is where we get use it or lose it. And this is good. You want your brain to get rid of things that you don't use and grow and strengthen things you do use. So here are some neurons. Now, these are rat neurons, by the way, because this is illegal to do this research on children. You can't be like, here, take THC every day for a month and let's see what happens to you. Okay, so you have to do it with rats. So these little bushy things out of the neuron, as a review, are dendrites, right? Dendrites, the things that communicate from cell to cell, neurons in the brain. And look how beautiful and bushy they are in a normal teenage rat. 2 weeks later, look at this beautiful growth as they are strengthening and getting myelinated. And here the color is like blood flow and brain activity. But if you give a teenage rat a THC pellet, 24 hours later, look at what has happened to the neuron. It is arrested. It is called, in neurology, hypofrontality. That neuron stops forming. It is paralyzed. But keep using THC, right? Mimic what a teen does, and they're hitting that vape all day, every day. Now, 2 weeks later, look at what has happened to the dendrites. They are all pruned off. So it turns out the brain does a little creative pruning. The doctors on our scientific advisory board explained it to me like this. Pretend that you have a scissors and that you close your eyes and try to cut your hair. You might be able to kind of do it, but you might snip off something that you would have wanted to keep. As a result, and again, I'm not going to go through everything in the brain, but there are so many changes to the hippocampus, where learning and memory take place, the basal ganglia, the cerebellum for coordination, reaction time with driving, IQ problems. I mean, there's a lot of different issues. But I want to draw particular attention to what we have seen in terms of the rise in mental health issues as a result of all of this pruning and changes when THC gets into that CB1 receptor in that endocannabinoid system in a forming teen brain. What have we been seeing as a result? So kind of back to Johnny's story. A couple years after he was using, like 16, and we would find things. We tried love, tough love, taking his phone. So anyway, I had to write a book about the whole thing because there's just so much that I could talk about that I don't have time for. But he started to kind of drop out of everything that used to give him joy. He stopped sports. He quit all of his service projects. You know, he was changing friend groups. He would sleep a lot. He kind of isolated himself more and more and got more just irritable. And sometimes this is hard for parents because, I mean, he's a teen boy. They sleep a lot anyway, right? They grunt, they're moody, so for us, I'm not excusing myself, I'm just explaining that often it was kind of difficult for me to tell what was drug use and what was just normal boy teen ick. But he never thought anything was going to happen because he would say, you know, I don't know what you want, Mom. I've got straight A's and I'm going to be the valedictorian, blah, blah. And it didn't look like much was happening to him until it did. And it was like that. Because remember, you can't see the changes that are going on in the brain. And so it was about the start of his senior year. This is, he's 17 here. In the book, I call this the unraveling, where things just, it was like an alien took my child and brought another one. And this one was mean, and he was verbally abusive. He would be like, F you. I mean, he was just nasty. And he was not compliant. He wouldn't do any chores. He lost interest in school, which was very unusual for him. And you can see our younger son here in the picture. It was bad for about 6 months. And then he turned 18 his senior year in February. And he announces he's leaving because he said, I'm an adult and you can't keep me from using and I'm moving out. And he did. And he rented a home. He took us off of his parent portal at school so we couldn't see if he was attending or not. And that is the semester he got 5 Ds. And we thought for sure that his scholarship would be pulled from Colorado State University because you can't get Ds and go off with your scholarship. Well, they did not check his transcript. So he marches off to Colorado State University with his scholarship. And he is there for 2 weeks. And I get a text from him. We're still trying to help him. Like we want him to go to treatment. We want him to be in the sober house at CSU. And of course we couldn't get him. He laughed at us, but he said, Mom, I'm having a hard time making friends. You know, I don't really fit in here. And I said, sweetie, that's normal. You know, you're a good friend. You just need to find, you know, your place. And he texted back, is it normal to feel like killing myself every day? He said, I have been dabbing nonstop with my roommate for 2 weeks. Now, I am embarrassed to tell you, I still did not understand what he was saying by dabbing. It still was not connecting with me about all these potency products and what was going on. It was very ignorant in many ways. But obviously, you know, I picked him up. He lost his scholarship. He had to drop out of school. He had to go to a mental hospital. They let him out after 3 days because he lied and he said, I'm not suicidal. And the nanograms per milliliter in his blood of THC were still off the chart from these dabs. His roommate moved there from Michigan just to use weed. So they let him out and he did try to kill himself in our home and we caught it. And he goes back to the mental hospital. This time he's under suicide attempt. So they keep him and the THC leaves his body for the very first time. And this is something I did not understand because THC, I didn't know, stays in your body for 4 weeks. Alcohol stays in your body for 24 to 48 hours because it's water soluble. THC is a lipid. it's fat soluble, and it slowly leaches out of your blood and is excreted in your body. So he still had THC in his system. And for Lord no, I mean, if you use every weekend, the THC never leaves your body. And when it did, he came back like it was Johnny again. And it was weird. And he felt just terrible because he had no anandamide, right? Your brain has to start producing your own feel-good chemicals again. And he was scared. And he was like, I will never use THC again. And he's sober. So we let him move back home. And he is home for a few months. He's like, oh, I'm going to get a job and I'm going to be sober. And he was, but then he said, I can't live in your basement my whole life. So I'm going to go to University of Northern Colorado and go back to school. And we thought this was a terrible idea because he had just had a suicide attempt. He was just newly sober. I said, why don't you just stay home for a semester? Nope. So he marches off. Here we are at University of Northern Colorado this time. And he's about almost 19 here. And he's there for just a couple months and he goes right back to using. And I'm like, Johnny, this has you suicidal, you sober. And he said, Mom, it's the way that you make friends. And it broke my heart because he wasn't willing to make friends the normal way. He just said, if you vape, if you dab, you're automatically accepted into this friend group. And he's there for 2 months. And I get a phone call in the middle of the night. It's 3:00. It's Johnny. And he's like, Mom, they have bugged my dorm room. And I'm like, who? What are you talking about? And he said, this is an FBI base. This is not a school. This is an FBI base. And I'm like, Johnny, that's not true. That is a university. And he goes, you're in on it. And he hangs up on me. And now I am the bad guy. So long story short, he has to go he went to a different mental hospital this time because he could not stop thinking that people were watching him and that his phone was listening to him and that his computer was bugged. He had just completely lost his mind. And after he died, the police had his phone. We got his phone and I couldn't get into it because I didn't know the password. And thank goodness we have a friend who is a cybersecurity expert and helped us get into his phone. And we could see the photos from there. So here's one where he was at Target and he buys 5 burner phones. And I'm like, what's with the phones? And he's like, people are watching you through your phone, right? He says here, can iPhones really be trusted though? So you can kind of see the suspiciousness. And after he died and we were in his apartment, we found a journal that he had been writing in. And I want to show you some of the things that he had been writing so that you can see what these really high potency THC products are doing to our teens' brains. He said here, I was set up by the mob. He said here, UNC is secretly a military base. And here the whole world knows about me. That would be pretty terrifying. They put him through all these tests. He never tested positive for anything but THC. Remember, I said it was just weed. And this was his diagnosis. THC abuse severe. They ran genetic tests. He didn't test positive for any of the gene clusters that can point to schizophrenia in the family, like COMT, ATK1. There's all these different gene clusters, and he didn't have any of those. And it's so funny to me that the U.S. still has not really caught up to this. I mean, I think we're doing better. We've been educating on this for about 5 years. And I think I've been on Dr. Phil and Fox News and, tons of media. And I think the word is slowly getting out. I think more and more people are hearing of this. We talk to reporters all the time, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, connect them with our families. We have 2,000 plus parents right now with children in cannabis-induced psychosis in our support group, in our nonprofit. And the US still pretends like, what? And so if you think about, smoking cigarettes is to lung cancer, like THC is to psychosis. That's a pretty good analogy. And in other countries, they know this already. This is like not even debated. Here's a study out of Denmark. This one is from a few years ago. Denmark, small, socialized medicine country, 7 million people. They pulled all of their medical records before they legalized marijuana in that country, 1995. They had a 2% incidence of schizophrenia in their country. After the legalization of marijuana, 2010, they pulled all the medical records again. Now they had an 8% incidence of schizophrenia in their population. And they removed all comorbidities, like people who already had mental illness, people who had genetic psychosis in the family, and it was still 8%. They concluded, and this came out in NIDA 2023, a joint research program, our own National Institutes of Drug Abuse here in the US, 7 million people, 5 decades of data. They concluded 30% of their young men ages 21 to 30 who had schizophrenia may not have had it had they not had cannabis use disorder when they were young. And it's about 4% for young women because the female brain is further along. That's Denmark. Move to Canada. Canada already knows this. This is new data out of Ontario, 12 million people, 2023, September. If you are a young man, ages 14 to 18, and you show up in an emergency room because you are having an episode from these products of cannabis-induced psychosis, that's the actual code, CIP, that's used medically, 41.3% of them in 3 years will be diagnosed with schizophrenia. 41.3. Here's more data. This again is from Canada. Very similar, startlingly similar to the data in Denmark. Before legalization, they had a 4% incidence of schizophrenia. It was just under 4. And in 2022, after, again, socialized medicine, we can't do this in the States. They can pull all their medical records, 10%, almost 11, so almost triple the incidence before. This is not attributable to genetics because those who do not have cannabis use disorder, they only have an incidence of 0.6% of the population who develop schizophrenia. But in the study period, 10% develop schizophrenia. So they have a control. So this is like the gold standard in research. This just came out, and this should scare everybody. But the US, they like to just, because it's all about the money, right? It's all about the money they're putting in the pockets. So this is the UK. Again, I don't know why the US is not listening to this. This is Marta DeForti and Sir Robin Murray and company. They are on our scientific advisory board. Regular use of high potency cannabis, and by the way, they only have skunk there, which is like 34%. They don't even have what we have. Remains a strong predictor of psychotic disorder, get this, independently of schizophrenia polygenic risk score, which rates genetically whether you're going to get it or not, which does not seem to be associated with heavy cannabis use. These are important findings at a time of increasing use and potency of cannabis worldwide. In Colorado, they know this. Remember that flyer I told you about that they put in the bag when someone buys something at a dispensary? This is the top of that flyer. Warning, use of marijuana concentrate may lead to psychotic symptoms and or psychotic disorder, delusions, hallucinations, difficulty distinguishing reality, mental health symptoms, problems, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, CHS, uncontrolled repetitive vomiting. That's a new vomiting disorder that's relatively new because it hits that CB2 receptor and instead of helping with nausea, makes people puke. and cannabis use disorder, i.e. addiction. This is a statement out of the American Psychiatric Association. There is no current scientific evidence that cannabis is in any way beneficial for the treatment of any psychiatric disorder. In contrast, current evidence supports, at minimum, a strong association of cannabis use with the onset of psychiatric disorders. Adolescents are particularly vulnerable to harm given the effects of cannabis on neurological development, end quote. Using THC does not help with anxiety, depression, PTSD, stress, bipolar, any of these psychiatric, everybody goes, oh, but it's going to help me chill out. It's going to help me, relax. It's going to help with my stress. It's going to help my anxiety. In young people, it does exactly the opposite. And short term, sure, it might help you like zone out and stone out for a while, but it's not going to help what's causing that. It's going to make it worse. And this is not, I'm not talking about like a 7-year-old who has seizures, who has to take Epidiolex, which is raw CBD. It's not even THC, right? I'm talking about a party drug, right? A lot of people think that the teens that are using this are having mental problems and they're using it because they're anxious. A lot of them that I'm talking to are using it because they want to get high. It's a party drug. It's much harder to get alcohol. I mean, in Colorado, they've got alcohol, really tamped down. But when you're 18, you can go to your pot shop doc and tell them you got a migraine and get a med card. And what people don't understand is that the seniors in high school who have med cards, which is just a sham, there's nothing medically wrong with them, can now go to a dispensary legally and buy these legal products with a legal card in a legal dispensary, and then they illegally sell them to other kids. And sadly, in Colorado, what we have seen now in our youth, the number one cause of death in our youth, ages 15 through 18, is suicide. And sadly, Johnny is now another statistic. He recovered again at the mental hospital. He could not stop thinking the mob was after him. So he got sober, and they gave him a little bit of an antipsychotic, and he came to, and he was like, whoa, I am never going to use that again. He was really like freaked out by it. He was like, okay, that was weird. The mob is not after me. Never mind. And again, got a job. We got him a little puppy. That's Benji. Benji lives with his aunt now, and he's doing really well. And I took him to Billy Joel. This was just a month before he died, and he was sober. He was doing really well. And so we were celebrating, and he said, this is great, right, Mom? This is awesome. I said, this is the best, honey. This is exactly what I hoped for. And he said, I am never going to use THC again, but I'm never going to smoke cigarettes again. I'm never going to drink alcohol again. I'm never going to take any drug again. And I am going to be a better person. And sadly, we did not know it, but he also stopped taking his antipsychotic just like that. And they say cannabis-induced psychosis. They want to titrate you off of that. We have seen 6 to 9 to 12 months and more before they start trying to see if the brain is going to come back and kind of what that new baseline is. But just like with an antipsychotic or an antidepressive, you don't just stop taking it. So we will never actually really know what happened, but we suspect the one he was on had a fairly long half-life, that maybe some of those thoughts were coming back. He came over to our house, and it was 3 days before he died. And he said, Mom, I just want you to know that you were right. And I said, about what? I didn't know what we were talking about. And he said, about the marijuana. He said, you probably don't remember, but you told me many years ago that marijuana would hurt my brain. And it has ruined my mind and my life. And I'm really sorry, Mama. I love you. I remember that like it was yesterday. I can see it in my mind's eye, and I wish I would have noticed it for what it probably was, which was his way of saying goodbye. I missed it. It was probably suicidal. Our relationship had been so damaged in the past 5 years that I thought he was reconciling. And so we hugged. And the day he died, I mean, it was just such a normal day. It was a nothing. I mean, we had gone to Red Robin for burgers the day before. He got his oil changed in his car. He had a normal doctor's appointment, and everything was just normal. But he sent out a Snapchat, which I guess was his suicide note, and he had blocked me on Snapchat, but our son got it, James, and it was a picture of his car odometer, and it read 133661. And he typed in the snap 133661. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. For one extreme to exist, it must be the opposing. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. Newton's third law? That's like, it's a very sick young man who the experts who have studied his work, he had a blog, he had a YouTube channel. I mean, he was brilliant. They think that maybe he added those 2 3s together and he saw that number as 16661, and red front to back would be the same, that maybe he thought that number was magic. Maybe he thought that he would never die. We don't know. We will never know. But this is now the statistic in Colorado. More teens have THC in their tox who die by suicide than any other drug. THC is the number one substance found in their tox. NIDA found 280,000 young adults ages 18 through 35. Cannabis use was associated with this increased risk of thoughts of suicide, plan, and attempt, even when they weren't depressed. This is new data, again, out of Canada, a large-scale Ontario-based 100,000 people who were diagnosed with cannabis use disorder within 5 years of receiving hospital-based care for cannabis use disorder. 3.5% of those individuals had died, 6 times the rate of the general population. And even after adjusting for different socio-demographic factors, use, mental health, chronic illness, it was still 2.5 times higher in individuals with cannabis use disorder. And in states where marijuana is legalized, we know suicide increases. Where there are no marijuana laws, in every 100,000 12 to 25-year-olds, 9.76. In medical states, 12.78. In recreational states, 16.68. I cried for 6 months. This was COVID. You remember what happened in early 2020. And so I was basically in a fetal position by myself with John, locked down and alone. And I started researching. I started writing. I had written several books before then. I was a professional speaker. So I decided, you know what? Nobody else is going to talk about this, so I will. And if I were a parent now, and I know Operation Parent has a lot of other resources, and I have some that I'm going to share with you now, and some at the end. But I would talk about this from an early age. 10 is not too young to talk about it. No use rules. And re-emphasized a lot. We know that when a parent disapproves, we have a much lower use rate than if you say nothing or just assume that they know that you don't approve. You cannot be indifferent. You must say you are not allowed to use under any circumstances. Don't use yourself. 80% of those parents who use in the home will have children who use. Know where your child's car is. They have trackers. And know where your child's phone is. And that is just a condition of owning a phone. I would recommend you charge your child's phone in your bedroom. Turns out this was when Johnny was getting in trouble, when I was asleep. After we put a security system in, found out a whole lot of things we didn't know. And there's really nothing that can be good that happens on the phone after 9 p.m. So buy them a regular alarm clock. I would highly recommend a regular drug test. You can get them over the counter, a THC test. If they're like, why don't you trust me, right? You can kind of tell, but it's like, look, I'm not your buddy. I'm here to keep you safe and to keep you alive. Pee in the cup, right? This is just not negotiable. And by the way, the teens who are drug tested tell us that they love that excuse because they can go to a party and be like, can't. My mom is psycho. She drug tests me every weekend. But it gives them like the best excuse that there is. Role play with them. And we do this in the schools, like what to do when someone hands you something and says, hit this, like they did with Johnny. So role play it. If your child's in trouble, have them text you a code word. I will get you anywhere, anytime, no questions asked. Text me the code word baseball, right? I will call you and be like, we have an emergency. And it's a game, right? Like, what's going on? Where are you? I have to come get you. And always check their social media. They are not entitled to privacy. They are not an adult. If they want the phone, you need to periodically check it. And don't tell them when you are checking all of their social media. We started Johnny's Ambassadors to prevent this from happening to another family and to educate the teens about what happens with these substances. And we share Johnny's warning. Marijuana ruined my mind and my life. And we show them a video of Johnny so they can see that he was just like them. If you want to hear the whole story, I published the book that Michelle mentioned. All proceeds go to Johnny's Ambassadors. The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana. It is on Amazon in all formats, Audible, it's in Kindle, it's in CDs. If you still have CDs, I don't know why they made it in a CD. And now basically what I do is travel around the United States full time, Monday through Friday when school is in session. We usually do about 3 assemblies a day, usually one first period before lunch and after lunch. So it's a pretty grueling schedule that we are desperate. We are desperate to communicate with teens. We also have parent coffees and parent lunch and learns, which are usually very well attended. And we take all of our donations as a nonprofit, and we put it back into creating resources that we give away for free. We do charge for assemblies, but everything else that we do is free. We have magazines, we have curriculum, we have PowerPoints, and I'm going to send Michelle all these links so you don't have to worry about writing all this down. But we have worksheets, we have posters, we have graphics, we have online lessons, we have materials for teachers. And if you know anyone who is worried about their child's THC use, whether you're listening to this webinar because you're worried and my story is sounding like your story, please reach out to me. We have support groups, we have treatment, we have help pages where we can get you help, because when this was happening to me, I didn't know what to do. And promise you, the industry is after your kids, and they are not going to stop until, in their opinion, all states are legal, all drugs are legal, and they're going to keep going. I was so excited that many states declined to legalize recreational marijuana in this last session, but they're going to come back and they are not going to give up. And we need you to help us. And that is why we called our nonprofit Johnny's Ambassadors, so that you can help us educate parents and teens and communities like what Operation Parent is doing. And we are so pleased and grateful to have them as one of our ambassadors. So if you want to be an ambassador and you want me to send you these materials, simply scan this QR code, give me your email address. I will not send you any spam. I will send you these educational resources so that you can use them in your communities, in your schools, and with your, and as a parent yourself. Well, I will stop sharing my screen here, Miss Michelle.
Thanks, Laura. First and foremost, let me just say, so sorry for your loss, but I'm so impressed with your passion and your gusto and the way that you are just attacking the substance problem that we have. What you have done even since the last time we were together to build Johnny Ambassadors and to reach so many organizations and parents, it blows me away. And I'm really proud of your work. I'm proud to know you.
Thank you.
We have to keep
this from happening to other
yes,
people.
yes. And I don't think I had a chance to tell you this, but I had a chance to speak with a leader from the Brook Hospital, and I said, we have the opportunity to work with parents. What is the one thing that you want them to know? What should we work on the most? And he said, I want them to know how many teens are here in the treatment center right now. This was just a month ago with psychosis from marijuana.
Yep.
And I also want them to know how long it's lasting, months. And so I was like, okay, that's why we need Laura to come back and remind us about everything that we're up against and why we need to stay strong. We've got a lot of work to do, but you're doing great work, and we're going to do it together and just keep parents informed about how strong.
It's a mess. It is just a mess everywhere, and so many people just don't understand the magnitude of the problem. Our doctors estimate on our board 1.1 million teens right now in cannabis-induced psychosis in the United States. That's the data they have currently extrapolated, and it doesn't have to happen. I mean, I totally believe with all my heart that Johnny would still be here with me if he hadn't had started to use at 14. And I believe if I knew then what I know now, I think I could have saved him, and that breaks my heart. But I'm hoping that his life and the lessons that we've learned in our mission to share his life gives life to others. And we know the teens are hearing us. They hear us.
They hear us.
Come up to me, and so many of them make different choices, and they don't use after they go, "Whoa, that's freak!" I'm not
absolutely right.
You just share the science.
They are dying. Teens are dying to know more. They want to know so much more because of all the things coming at them. So I'm so thankful that you're on the front lines and telling them, like you say, the way you titled your book, you're just telling people the truth. You need to know the truth, right? We've got a couple other resources to share with the audience. Also, a couple of our other past webinars. If you're like Laura and you're never going to stop studying and learning more, we thought these two webinars were very relevant to the topic: Prevention, Science, and Action with Dr. Coyer and Jake White. It's up on our site in the YouTube area, as well as hopefully, if you already know Dr. Danielle Dick, or you'll meet her along the way. She's out of Rutgers University, and she talked to us about what every parent needs to know about substance use and genes. If you have a family history of substance use in your family, what you might want to know and how you might want to work with your teens to understand the family history. You love these national resources as well, Laura. We love them and promote them often. The Partnership to End Addiction, NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, SAM. We love Smart Approaches to Marijuana and the work that they're doing and the legislation that they're doing. And then, of course, SAMHSA is one of our very favorites. And so if you're new to this topic, those are a couple of resources that you can't go wrong if you check them out.
And Johnny'sAmbassadors.org.
Well, of course, Johnny Ambassadors has their whole slide here. And some things that we like that Laura's doing, everything, of course, but we love the strength of her newsletter, and her expert webinar series is outstanding. Just her spirit, what she's doing. If you haven't gotten a copy of her book, you really should read it. I wanted to ask, do you do the Audible? Is that your voice for the Audible?
The Audible is the new KDP, the Amazon voice generated. It's really cool.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
Now, the Audible version, we have a couple books out by Johnny's Ambassadors. You'll see there. The one I did, I recorded myself. And it was hard. It took me 3 days because I kept crying. And so I couldn't record.
Yeah, of course.
Couldn't record it. But the impact of THC on our children is an Audible voice the one that I wrote about Johnny, The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana, that one is my voice.
And your book club guide would be excellent if you're looking to do a community read, get parents together and just keep digging in on this topic. Think about using the book club guide as well. Our parent handbooks are another resource that you can add to your list. This is a guide to have meaningful conversations about drugs, vaping, alcohol, and several of the other toughest topics that we're dealing with as a parent. We have to stand strong against how strong these substances are. And you want to make a decision to have this handbook and Laura's resources in your back pocket because you need them. We have to get ahead, and we have to be having these conversations, and we have to update them as things change in our culture, and they are changing every day. So the more you learn, the more you have in your pocket, the better. And so I can't encourage you enough to look at our handbooks and think about getting a copy of them. Maybe think of it as a sample that you could take to your school or to your community organization. There is bulk pricing available, but even just having one edition in your own home, you will not regret it. There's an elementary version, middle, high, and Spanish available.
Nice.
Our TNT is a drug prevention event for middle schoolers, and it teaches them drug facts as well as drug refusal skills. We held this event in our community. We had over 400 students from the middle schools in all of our areas and parents. So everyone came together on a Saturday afternoon. We were blown away by the interest and the attendance, and we got to put this kit to use. So we're going to show you a video so that you can learn a little bit more about the TNT program and see if it might be useful in your community.
TNT is a really exciting drug prevention event. This event is going to help youth in drug prevention because I think a lot of times we're afraid to say specific things about drugs. We're just saying no, don't do it. And instead, we're letting the kids know, hey, it's more than don't do it, but this is the why behind it.
It's called Trends in Training, where we educate both the parents and the students about all the different things that are happening in their lives, whether it's drug information, mental health, whatever it may be. We're just here to educate, but we do it in a fun way. The kids are out on inflatables learning drug facts and refusal skills. The parents are in here learning about just some of the more serious pieces of it, but also we're here to give the parents hope.
TNT started in 2015. We were trying to figure out a better way to get kids to understand the dangers of all the different drugs and alcohol and different trends going around. And we wanted something a little different than just handing them like a promotional item or something. We wanted to create just this fun atmosphere where they were learning the drug facts and equipping them and educating them so that they could remember the facts and be better suited to fight against it.
Our TNT event can be large scale and small scale. So anywhere from an event in the cafeteria for Red Ribbon Week, whether you're a health department or a sheriff's department, or if you're a church, you can throw this event, or we can go more large scale for a larger event, so more of an event in the community. TNT is for anybody to throw.
Operation Parent makes throwing TNT so easy for you because we have everything you need. We have the posters, we have the wristbands, we have the t-shirts, but most importantly, we have a kit that shows you step-by-step instructions on what you need to do from a small event to a large event, and again, everything in between.
What excites me most about TNT is just the excitement as they're learning, and we've also partnered with parents now. We're equipping them as well with talking tips to go home and talk to their kids about all the different things that they learned, the refusal skills, and we're helping educate the parents as well, so we're kind of putting the team together in the household.
It's really important that we're not leaving the prevention conversation for kids to figure out what TikTok says, what does Instagram say, what does my friends say, but for a community to band together and say, hey, this is our stance on drugs. We're gonna come together and make this school community or the community at large a safer place.
So I hope you can tell from the video that we had parents in one room and worked with them for a good bit of the afternoon. And then the students were outside where they got a lot of movement and activities and got to go to the different stations and enjoy each other. It was an amazing event. And one thing that I was reminded when watching the video is how many dads were there. So, you know, moms are often carrying a lot of the work and the lift with getting these resources, talking with kiddos, and dads are certainly there as well. But I just want you to know this was a really nice event, and dads were into it and joined us as well. So I hope you also follow us on our social media platforms if you're not already. Everything is at Operation Parent, are on all of our handles on all of our platforms. We do usually a follow-up after each webinar too. So if you wanted to share that out and let folks know to go back in and check out Laura's webinar, that would be great. You could share and encourage people to watch this program because it is amazing and she has taught us so much this afternoon. We also have just a lot of quick and easy tips for how to connect with your teen on there, and drug facts, refusal skill type posts that you can easily share out in your community and take a little bit of the work off yourself because we're all trying to do a lot. Please do the quick registration for these next webinars if you're interested. I certainly think you will find them valuable and continue to explore with us different ways so that we can talk with our teens and young adults at different ages about all the tough things that they're up against. So today we've got a couple of questions. We took questions from the audience, and so we're going to share those with Laura. So could you talk to us about what you're seeing or what you know to be the difference between smoking weed, dabbing, and edibles? And what kind of questions are teens asking you at the assemblies about those products?
That is a great question. I talk with them a lot about, you know, old weed, like actual weed that grew in the ground, like when I was a kid, you know, explaining that a joint back in the 80s, I mean, even if it were really strong, would be maybe 5 milligrams of THC. And today, an edible, one serving of an edible, as I mentioned, is 10 milligrams, which is like smoking 2 joints. And if you think about the ear of a gummy bear, right, that is a serving. That's how strong it is. The carts and the dabs are even worse in terms of potency. And that's very concerning because pens and vapes are very popular right now in schools as well as the gummies. But, you know, a vape, if you buy a cart, you know, and it's a gram and you look at the back and it says 80% times a gram means in the cart, there's 800 milligrams of THC. So if there's like 200 puffs in the pen, every time you hit it, it's like 4 or 5 milligrams, which is like a joint. But that's a 1-second hit. Most of the teens take draws, like, you know, so that's 4 or 5 servings. So, I mean, that's 20, 25 milligrams of THC. When you do the math, it's like 4 or 5 joints from when I was a kid, just in a draw, and they hit it all day long. I mean, some of these kids are going through a cart in a day. The dabs are even stronger because they're heavier. So if you have a gram of, say, wax, 80%, it's still 800 milligrams, but there's only like, say, 8 servings in there. So every dab is like 100 milligrams, but most of the teens don't have that little serving size chart. So we're seeing hits of dabs like 250 milligrams, 300 milligrams compared to 5 in an entire joint. And remember, we shared it. We didn't, you know, just smoke a joint all by ourselves because that would burn your lungs and throat. It was bad. And so really doing the math with the teens, explaining about how strong these products are and what is going into their brains, and actually have them be able to understand reading packages and calculations, they are shocked. I mean, they're shocked because everybody goes, oh, you know, whatever, it's just weed. But when you look at it in terms of the milligrams that you're ingesting, That would be like, instead of 2 extra strength Tylenols, oh, just take 40, right? I mean, so the serving size is there for a reason. And when you use more than that, it is called an overdose because you're taking over the dose that you're supposed to. So all of these products, including the flower, the weed, is all high potency. Hope that helps.
So there's so many products and so strong. What you talked a lot to us about Johnny's emotions that he went through and how his behaviors started just changing drastically from your Johnny. What maybe talk to us a little bit more about what parents are saying to you today about what they've seen in their teens about emotional and behavioral changes, and maybe how they dealt with that and how they're.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, it's kind of hard sometimes to tell if your teen is using THC. I mean, if you drug test them, of course you would know. If you find things, you would know. And some of the parents don't even really know what the paraphernalia is, so you might want to get educated on that. You know, things that look like USB thumb drives are not USB thumb drives. Those are usually chargers for vapes. You know, they're all hidden. You can look at a, you know, hidden in plain sight presentation, which shows you, you know, it can look like a Sharpie. Things can be hidden inside everyday things that are in their bedroom and you wouldn't even know it. But, you know, being sneaky, being secretive, hanging out with people's different, changing friend groups that you kind of feel are like sketchy, changes even in sleeping behavior, the way they eat, not eating enough, vomiting, you know, the cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, just like binging on junk food. I mean, there's so many different signs, isolating, dropping out of activities, not participating in family activities. We went on an amazing vacation when Johnny was a junior in high school that we'd saved for a long time, and he would not go. And I could not throw him over my shoulder and make him go. And I cried the whole time because we were at this vacation and he just stayed home and kind of stayed in his room. I mean, becoming angry or violent, you know, verbal abuse, you know, just being paranoid or depressed. Certainly if they start saying really delusional things, that is a straight to the emergency room visit. Anything suicidal, even remotely hinting that my life is not worth it. But even things like missing your kitchen lighters, you know, your butane torch for your creme brulee is mysteriously gone. Those are used in dabbing. You know, if you find burned straws, burned spoons, burned tin foil, all of those products all have to be heated to a very high amount, you know, and then inhaled. So there's so many different signs and things to just really be observant, and it's easy to miss. It's easy to miss a lot of them, and that's why we recommend just suddenly, randomly drug testing your child. Don't tell them you're going to do it. Here, you know, you're going to pee in this cup. I'm going to drug test you, and you can get them on Amazon. They're over the counter. And if your child is like, whatever, okay, you know, pee in the cup, they're probably going to be. But if they start like, why don't you trust me? You know, there's a pretty good sign. We have every summer we hold a 2-day youth THC prevention conference that's live streamed all over the US, but it's also here in Denver, 24th and 25th of June this year. And we are going to have experts in addiction and psychology and doctors and a whole bunch of other things for parents to really understand the struggle. And if you have a child you are worried about, definitely reach out to me, Michelle, because people think that,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to bother her. That's why we're here, right? That we
Right. That's why yes.
reach out to us.
I saw the lineup for your virtual conference, Laura. I saw the lineup for your summer conference. It's incredible. So if you'd like for us to share with the audience that link as well to register, we'd be honored to do that.
Yeah, that's
And
our fourth annual. Yeah, so that'd be amazing.
yeah, so I think that's probably the perfect note for us to close on. Is we've got many things coming down the pike, including Laura's virtual. We've got lots of resources that the audience can choose from. And we just want parents to know that you've got this. It's hard on purpose. Like you mentioned, there's stash. Like one of the things we do around here often is Google just stash pockets.
Yeah.
And you Google stash pockets and you can see all the ways that things can be hidden. There's just this culture that it's designed to hide things. So it is easy to miss things, but that's why we're here. We're here to help you know more and give you information that we're learning around the way and along the way. And we just want to let parents know you've got this and our organizations have got you. We're here to support you and we are all in this together. And so Laura, thank you. And we will hope to see you again very soon. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Thanks
Hey.
to you, and thanks to Operation Parent. You guys are doing an amazing job. I appreciate being invited. Take care.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.